All we're doing today is intervals of increasing and decreasing. So when we look at a graph, we're either going to say that the line is increasing if it's slanted upward, decreasing if it's slanted downward. When we are determining if a graph is increasing or decreasing, you read from left to right, just like you're used to. And we're going to use something called interval notation. So when we write our answer, we're going to start with a parenthesis. And it's going to look like a point, a coordinate, but it's not. The first number we write is the starting x, and then comma. And then the second number we write is the ending x. And what I mean by that is we're going to look at the section of the graph where it's slanted up. Wherever it starts increasing, there's going to be a point. We're going to write that x value. Wherever it stops, we're going to write that x value. So what's really important is that you only write the x values of the points. Occasionally, you will have an arrow. That arrow really means that this line goes down forever. So you could not find a starting point. If that's the case, if we have an arrow on the left, or we start at an arrow, if the starting side is an arrow, you put negative infinity. If I end on an arrow, so I have a right arrow, we put just regular infinity, positive infinity. Because you really cannot find the true ending spot because it goes forever.
So the first one would be that would be the answer.
Yep. So with this first graph, we're just going to identify where it's increasing and where it's decreasing. We're not going to actually write out these intervals. We will do that with the rest of the examples. So I'm going to use pink when I am doing my increasing. If you have your own colored pencils or highlighters, you can use them. If not, you don't necessarily need two colors. I'm going to use blue for decreasing. So if I start out on the far left and I trace the graph, am I increasing or decreasing? Increasing. So this would be an increasing interval, that section where I increase. What about right here?
Yeah, what's that called?
It's neither. If it doesn't go up or down, it's just neither.
Zero.
Okay. So then the next section, increase. And then what? Decrease.
So is it possible not to have a decrease?
No, not on the ones we're doing. So let's actually get into this first example. So when I first start out, what does my graph start out doing? Increasing or decreasing?
Decrease.
If I go left to right, I'm tracing the line and it's going up. So it's increasing.
So are we counting the number of times it's increasing and decreasing?
What I'm doing is I'm going to say, okay, right here, this section, where do I start increasing?
Oh, okay.
Really?
You can't.
That arrow really means I go on forever. So I'm going to put negative infinity. I technically start on an arrow. If we start on an arrow, we put negative infinity. Then I go all the way up here. What is the x value where I stop increasing? What? 0. So my increasing interval is from negative infinity to 0. Once I'm up here, this is called my maximum point. Once I'm at my maximum, what do I start doing? Decreasing. So where did I start decreasing?
6.
What x value? 0. We only use the x values. So I started at 0. Where did I stop? 2.6. So from 0 to 2.6, I am decreasing. Then what?
Increase again.
I increase again. Where do I start increasing? 2.6. Where do I stop? Positive infinity. If you are stopping on an arrow, you're going to put positive infinity. Doesn't matter if it's pointing up or down. We're not looking at up or down, we're looking at left or right. And even though it's still slanted slightly to the right. So this graph is going to the right, which means it ends on positive infinity. It's going to increase forever and ever and ever. Okay. Number 2. What does my graph start doing? Increasing. So I started where? Negative infinity, and I stopped at 0.1. Good. So I'm up at the maximum, and then I go downhill just a little bit. That's decreasing. Where do I start decreasing? 0.1, and I stop at 1. The x value is 1. Then I increase from 1 to 2.7. And I decrease from 2.7 to positive infinity. Good. But it's pointing to the right. It's not up versus, it's not up and down, it's thinking here. This is where I started going down. X value is 2.7.
So every time you go up or down one, do you take
The x value.
and add it on or subtract it off? To the increase?
Well, we write here, it's the first number you write is the starting x. So here I started at this point has an x value of 2.7. So I started going downhill at 2.7. The reason I have infinity is because this line keeps on going forever. Let's go to one where we actually have to graph it ourselves. So you'll need your calculator. So in order to graph it, we need to get the maximums and minimums. So you're going to go into your y equals. And type in negative x cubed plus 3x squared Then you can hit graph to see the graph. And then when I hit the trace button, it's going to put my cursor somewhere on the line. And so I can use my left and right arrows to trace along the graph. What I want is this minimum point.
Zero.
It is at the point 0, 0. You may see something a little different. If you see something that has an E in it, that still means 0. So we have a minimum point at 0, 0. And I want you to actually write in that coordinate. And then I keep tracing over to this maximum. Which is 1.9. That would actually round up to 7. And then this one would probably just round up to 4. So 1.974. And do the best you can. I know you can't see all those lines. 1.974. And then sketch the line.
Just the same.
Any questions on getting the graph? So it does start. If I start tracing with my finger, I'm going to be going down. I am going to be starting out decreasing. So where does it start decreasing? It's going to be negative. Even though it's pointing up, we don't care about up, down. We know it's pointing to the left, and left is negative. So negative infinity. Where does it stop?
0, 0.
This x value of 0. If you don't write these coordinates in, you're not going to remember what those points are necessarily. It's just a lot easier if you put them on the graph. And then from there, I do what? Increase. Where do I start increasing?
0, 0.
At 0 until I get to
1.97.
1.97. Good. And then from there, what do I do?
Going down.
Decrease. So from where?
1.97.
To positive infinity. Good. Are there any questions so far? We can skip number 4. I want you to go down and work on number 5 by yourself. So here's number 5. I increased, this first section is increasing. So I started on an arrow, so we started with negative infinity all the way up to this point, and that x value is negative 1.06. Okay? And so from there, I decreased from negative 1.06 down to this x value of 0. And then increase from 0 to 1.82, decrease from 1.82 to infinity.